Dr. Zara Keth walked through the endless halls of the great library of Centauri Prime. Her footsteps echoed softly on the crystal floors as she passed rows of data terminals and floating holographic displays. The library held the recorded history of 3,000 different species across the galaxy. As one of the most respected historians in known space, Zara had access to almost every piece of information stored here. Almost every piece. She stopped at a restricted access terminal in the deepest section of the library. The area was quiet and dimly lit. Few people ever came here, because most of the files required special permission to view. Zara placed her hand on the scanner and waited as blue light swept across her palm. "Access granted, Dr. Keth," the computer said in a calm voice. "Please state your research request. I want to search for information about extinct species from the last 500 years, Zara said. The screen filled with dozens of entries. Most were species that had died out naturally or been destroyed by disease or natural disasters. But one entry caught her attention. It was marked with red warning symbols and the words. The file was labeled simply, Vorthak Documentation. Zara had never heard of the Vorthak before. In all her years studying galactic history, she had never come across any reference to them. That was strange because she knew about even the smallest extinct civilizations. How could an entire species disappear from the historical record so completely? She tried to open the file but received an immediate warning message. This file contains sensitive historical data. Access requires special authorization from the Galactic Historical Council. Do you wish to proceed? Zara hesitated. She had level 9 clearance, which was the highest possible rating for civilian researchers. If her access was being questioned, this file must contain something very serious. But her curiosity was stronger than her caution. Yes, proceed with access, she said. The file opened slowly, as if the computer itself was reluctant to share the information. The first thing Zara saw was a basic species profile. The Vorthak had been tall, gray-skinned beings with 4 arms and large black eyes. They had possessed advanced technology and controlled 17 star systems in what was now the peaceful Outer Rim territory. But according to the file, they had completely disappeared exactly 200 years ago. Not gradually died out, not been destroyed by war or disease. They had simply vanished from existence in a matter of months. Zara scrolled through more files and found fragmentary records from various galactic governments. Most of the information had been classified or deleted, but she found enough pieces to form a troubling picture. The Vorthak had been involved in some kind of conflict with humanity. References to aggressive actions and unacceptable behavior appeared in several documents. One partial military report mentioned humanitarian intervention by human forces. Another file referenced extreme measures necessary for galactic security. But none of the documents explained exactly what the Vorthak had done to provoke such a response. Zara found a video file buried deep in the restricted section. It was a personal log recorded by a human starship captain named Jin Woo-sung. The image was grainy and the audio was poor, but she could make out a young man in a blue uniform sitting in what looked like a ship's cabin. Personal log, day 47 of the diplomatic mission, Captain Jin said. His voice sounded tired and stressed. We tried everything. We offered them treaties, rehabilitation programs, even complete amnesty, if they would just stop. But they wouldn't listen. Command says they've crossed the line now. There's no going back. The recording ended abruptly. Zara searched for more files from Captain Jin but found nothing. It was as if all records of him had been carefully removed from the database. She discovered that 3 other species had tried to document what happened to the Vorthak. The Zephyrians, the Kralians, and the Talani had all filed official reports about the incident. But when Zara tried to access these files, she found they had also been classified at the highest levels. The more she searched, the more confused she became. Why would the disappearance of one species require such extreme secrecy? What had the Vorthok done that was so terrible it needed to be hidden from history? Finally, she found one more file that made her blood run cold. It was a single line from Admiral Sarah Chen's personal command log, dated exactly 200 years ago. We gave them every chance to stop. They chose extinction. Zara stared at the words on her screen. Chose extinction? What did that mean? How could anyone choose to become extinct? She tried to access Admiral Chen's complete records, but found they were sealed under something called Omega Protocol classification. She had never heard of Omega Protocol before, and when she tried to research it, the computer told her the information was restricted beyond her clearance level. A soft chime indicated someone was approaching her terminal. Zara quickly closed the files and turned to see Librarian Vex, an elderly Centauri with concerned eyes. Dr. Keth, Vex said quietly, I noticed you have been accessing very old, restricted files. Are you researching something specific? Just looking into some gaps in the historical record, Zara replied, trying to sound casual. Nothing important. Vex studied her for a moment. Some gaps exist for good reasons, Doctor. Some knowledge is too dangerous to preserve completely. Perhaps you should focus your research on more recent events. After Vex left, Zara sat alone in the dim light of the terminal. She understood the warning, but she could not ignore what she had found. An entire species had been erased from existence by humanity 200 years ago. The records had been deliberately hidden or destroyed. And somehow, this terrible secret had been kept from the entire galaxy. She made a decision that would change everything. She would find out what really happened to the Vorthok, no matter how dangerous the truth might be. Someone needed to know what humanity was truly capable of when pushed too far. Zara began copying files to a secure storage device, working quietly in the shadows of the Great Library. She did not know that her research would soon uncover the most terrifying secret in galactic history. Dr. Zara Keth traveled to the outer colonies to find beings old enough to remember the time when the Vorthok existed. Most species lived longer than humans, so there were still survivors who had witnessed events from 2 centuries ago. But finding someone willing to talk about what happened proved more difficult than she expected. Her first real lead came on the mining world of Zephyr VII. Elder Threnx was over 400 years old and had served as a diplomatic observer during the final years of the Vorthak civilization. When Zara contacted him, his response was immediate and troubling. You should not dig into this history, young historian. Threnx wrote in his message. Some memories are too heavy for minds that did not live through the darkness. But if you must know, I will meet with you once. After that, you must decide if the truth is worth carrying. Zara found Threnx living in a simple cave home carved into a crystal cliff. The elderly Zephyrian was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large silver eyes that seemed to hold centuries of sadness. He welcomed her with traditional tea but remained silent for a long time before speaking. I was there when the humans first discovered what the Vorthok truly were, Threnx began slowly. We all thought we knew about slavery in the galaxy. Many species had practiced it at some point in their history. But the Vorthak were different. They did not just enslave bodies. They broke minds and souls for entertainment. Threnx explained that the Vorthok had perfected psychological torture over thousands of years. They captured members of other species and used advanced techniques to completely destroy their personalities. The victims were kept alive, but their minds were shattered beyond any hope of repair. They called it the art of breaking, Threnx continued. Entire species were reduced to empty shells that could only follow simple commands. The Vorthak found this amusing. They would hold competitions to see who could break a being most completely while keeping them alive. Zara felt sick as she listened. How many species did they destroy this way? Armin, seconding. At least 30 that we knew of. Probably more. When the humans first encountered Vorthak slave worlds, they found millions of broken beings, from dozens of different species. Some had been tortured for centuries. Others were still being experimented on. Thranks described the human response to this discovery. At first, human diplomatic teams tried to negotiate the release of the slaves. They offered the Vorthak technology, territory, even tribute in exchange for ending their practices. The humans believed they could reason with anyone, Thranks said. They spent months trying to find a peaceful solution. They brought in their best negotiators and offered the Vorthak everything they could want. But the Vorthak were not interested in anything except causing suffering. The situation became worse when the Vorthak captured a human diplomatic ship. Instead of killing the crew quickly, they decided to demonstrate their techniques on human beings. They broadcast the torture sessions across human space as a form of entertainment. I was monitoring human communications when they received those transmissions, Thranks said quietly. I watched their leaders as they saw their people being broken. Something changed in them that day. Their voices became cold. Their eyes became empty. We knew something terrible was coming. Zara traveled to 3 more worlds to interview other witnesses. A Kralian trader named Voss told her about seeing massive human fleets moving toward Vorthak space with unnatural precision. The ships traveled in perfect formations and communicated using encrypted channels that no other species could decode. Human military movements are usually chaotic and flexible, Voss explained. They adapt and change based on circumstances, but these fleets moved like machines. Every ship knew exactly where to go and what to do. It was like watching a single mind controlling thousands of vessels. A Talani merchant named Kira described the change in human behavior during the final months before the Vorthak disappeared. Humans stopped talking about the situation completely. Before, their leaders would give speeches about finding peaceful solutions. Their news broadcasts would discuss diplomatic progress. But suddenly, there was only silence. The most disturbing account came from an Aqualian observer who had been stationed near the border between human and Vorthak space. We detected massive energy readings coming from human territory. Weapons tests, we thought. But the power levels were beyond anything we had ever seen. They were testing something new, something that made our most advanced technology look like primitive tools. All the witnesses told Zara the same thing. Humanity had changed completely during those final months. The species known for their kindness and desire to help others had become something cold and calculating. They stopped trying to save everyone and focused on a single goal that they never discussed publicly. The humans tried to save us all, Elder Thranks told her, as their conversation ended. When that failed, they did something else entirely. They became something else entirely. As Zara prepared to leave Zephyr the Seventh, Thranks gave her one final warning. You ask me what happened to the Vorthak, but that is the wrong question, young historian. The right question is what the Vorthak turned humanity into, and whether that thing still exists, sleeping somewhere in human space, waiting for another species to cross the same line. Zara's hands shook as she recorded her notes. Every witness had described the same transformation, humanity evolving from protectors into something far more frightening. But none of them could tell her exactly what the humans had done to completely erase the Vorthak from existence. She needed to find someone who had been there when it happened, someone who had seen the final act of the Vorthak War, and she knew exactly where to look. The human military archives that contained the records of their most classified operations. Dr. Zara Keth spent weeks trying to gain access to human military archives. Most records from the Vorthak period were classified far beyond her clearance level, but she finally found a connection through the Veterans Administration database. Captain Jin Woo-sung, the officer whose video log she had seen in the library, was still alive and living on New Seoul Colony. It took several messages before Jin agreed to meet with her. His response was brief and cautious. I am retired and prefer not to discuss my service record. However, If you are researching the Vorthak situation for historical purposes, I will speak with you once. Bring proper identification, and come alone. Jin lived in a simple apartment overlooking a peaceful garden. He was now an elderly man with gray hair and tired eyes, but Zara could see the strength that had once made him a starship captain. He served her tea in traditional Korean cups and sat quietly for several minutes before speaking. I was young and believed in peaceful solutions to every problem, Jin began. The diplomatic service taught us that any conflict could be resolved through proper communication and understanding. I volunteered for the Vorthak mission because I wanted to prove that humanity could solve this crisis without violence. Jin explained that his ship, the Harmony's Edge, had carried humanity's final ultimatum to the Vorthak High Command. The message was simple. Release all slaves immediately and submit to galactic rehabilitation programs, or face the consequences. We honestly believed they would accept, Jin said. The evidence of their crimes was overwhelming. The galactic community was united against them. Any reasonable species would have negotiated. We gave them a way to survive and rebuild their civilization. Instead, the Vorthak responded by capturing Jin's entire diplomatic escort fleet. 12 human ships, with over 3,000 crew members, were taken prisoner. The Vorthak announced that they would demonstrate their techniques on human subjects for the entertainment of the galaxy. Jin's voice became quiet as he described what happened next. They kept me alive to watch. They said I needed to report back to human leadership about what they could do to us. For 3 weeks, I was forced to observe as they systematically broke my crew members using their psychological torture methods. The Vorthak broadcast these sessions live across galactic communication networks. They wanted every species to see what happened to those who opposed them. But their main audience was humanity itself. They were trying to terrorize us into submission, Jin explained. They believed that if humans saw what they could do to us, we would become too frightened to continue fighting. They did not understand humanity at all. We would become. Jin described the final day of his captivity. Admiral Sarah Chen herself had come to negotiate his release. She arrived with a small escort and requested a face-to-face meeting with Vorthak leadership. Jin was brought to the meeting as proof that humans were being held prisoner. I will never forget Admiral Chen's face when she saw what they had done to my crew, Jin said. She looked at the broken humans around the room, then at the Vorthak leaders who were smiling with pride at their work. Something died in her eyes that day. The Vorthak leader had spoken directly to Admiral Chen during that meeting. This is what we do to those who oppose us. Your species will submit to our authority, or we will break every human in the galaxy. We have perfected the art of suffering over thousands of years. Admiral Chen's response was calm and controlled. You had 800 years to change your ways. You chose to perfect evil instead. I came here to offer you one final chance for survival. You have just refused it. The Vorthak leader laughed. What can your primitive species do to us? We have faced the combined fleets of dozens of civilizations and defeated them all. You are about to find out, Chen replied. Jin was released 3 hours later as a gesture of contempt. The Vorthak wanted him to carry word back to humanity about their helplessness against Vorthak power. But as Jin's rescue ship departed, he received an encrypted message from Admiral Chen that would haunt him forever. Initiate Protocol Omega, the message read. Congressional approval override authorized by emergency powers. Target: complete species erasure. Time frame: immediate. Jin had never heard of Protocol Omega before. When he asked his rescue crew about it, they became silent and would not meet his eyes. It was not until he returned to human space that he learned what those words meant. We did not just declare war on the Vorthak, Jin told Zara quietly. We declared their extinction. Not defeat, not conquest, not even unconditional surrender. Complete and total erasure from existence. Jin accessed his personal files and showed Zara the classified orders that had been sent to every human fleet commander within hours of Admiral Chen's meeting. The orders were unlike anything in human military history. They did not call for the capture of Vorthak territory or the destruction of their military forces. They called for the systematic elimination of every Vorthak in the galaxy. The orders were very specific. Jin explained. No Vorthak was to be left alive anywhere in known space. Their worlds were to be made uninhabitable. Their ships were to be completely destroyed. Even their historical records and cultural artifacts were to be eliminated. Zara stared at the documents in shock. How could humanity justify complete genocide? Jin was quiet for a long moment. They justified it by saying, the Vorthak were not a civilization that could be reformed or contained. They were a cancer that would spread and destroy other species forever if allowed to survive. The decision was made that the galaxy would be safer with them completely gone. As their meeting ended, Jin showed Zara one final document. Admiral Chen's personal journal entry from the day she ordered the extinction protocol. We are about to become the very thing we have always fought against, Chen had written. We are going to commit genocide against an entire species. History will remember us as monsters. But if it means no other species will ever suffer what the Vorthak have done to millions of innocent beings, then we will carry that burden. Some evils are too great to allow continued existence. Jin walked Zara to the door of his apartment. You asked me what happened to the Vorthak. The truth is, we happened to them. Humanity happened to them. And we made sure it could never happen to anyone else. Dr. Zara Keth used Captain Jin's military contacts to gain access to classified battle recordings from the Vorthak War. What she found in those files challenged everything she thought she knew about human capabilities and moral limitations. The humans had not simply won a war against the Vorthak. They had methodically erased them from existence with terrifying efficiency. The first shock came when she accessed the technical specifications for Protocol Omega. Humanity had secretly developed weapons and strategies that went far beyond anything other galactic species possessed. Planet-cracking bombs that could shatter entire worlds. Biological scrubbers that eliminated all traces of Vorthak DNA from contaminated areas. Quantum disruptors that could erase digital records from any computer system. Admiral Sarah Chen's strategic logs revealed the full scope of the operation. This is not a military campaign, Chen had written. This is an extermination. We are removing a disease from the galaxy, and diseases must be completely eliminated or they will return stronger than before. The human battle plan was unlike anything in recorded military history. Traditional warfare focused on defeating enemy forces and capturing territory. But Protocol Omega had a different goal entirely. Ensuring that no trace of Vorthak civilization could ever be recovered or rebuilt. Zara watched battle footage that made her sick to her stomach. Human fleets did not just attack Vorthak military targets. They systematically destroyed every world the Vorthak had ever visited. Planets that had been cleansed of Vorthak presence decades earlier were still targeted for complete sterilization. We cannot risk leaving any contaminated areas, Admiral Chen explained in her personal recordings. The Vorthak corruption goes deeper than physical presence. They have influenced the societies they touched in ways that could resurface generations later. Everything must be cleansed. The human forces used weapons that other species had never seen before. Ships that could phase through normal matter to attack from inside enemy vessels. Devices that could alter the fundamental structure of matter at the atomic level. Technology that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics. How long have humans possessed these capabilities? Zara wondered, as she watched recordings of entire star systems being systematically destroyed. The answer came in Admiral Chen's private communications with human leadership. We have been preparing for this scenario for over a century, Chen had reported. The Omega weapons were designed specifically for threats that conventional warfare cannot address. We hoped we would never need to use them. As the war progressed, the Vorthak began to realize They were facing something far beyond their understanding. Battle recordings showed Vorthak commanders desperately trying to surrender as human fleets approached their remaining strongholds. But the humans ignored all attempts at negotiation. One particular recording caught Zara's attention. A Vorthak leader was broadcasting from their homeworld as human ships entered the system. "We surrender," the alien screamed. "We will release all slaves! We will submit to any conditions! Please spare our children." The human response came from Admiral Chen herself. "You had 800 years to spare other species' children. You chose to torture them instead. There will be no negotiation. There will be no surrender. There will be no mercy." The destruction of the Vorthak homeworld took less than 6 hours. Zara watched in horror as human weapons tore the planet apart layer by layer. They did not simply bombard it from orbit. They methodically destroyed every structure, eliminated every living thing, and then used molecular disruptors to break down the very rocks and soil. When the process was complete, nothing remained but empty space and scattered debris. But the homeworld was not the end. Human forces spent the following months hunting down every Vorthak ship, outpost, and colony in known space. They tracked individual Vorthak who had tried to escape and eliminated them one by one. They found Vorthak artifacts in museums across the galaxy and destroyed them completely. The most disturbing part was how other galactic species reacted to the human campaign. Most civilizations simply watched in terrified silence as humanity demonstrated capabilities they had never revealed before. Some tried to offer assistance, but humans politely declined all help. "This is our responsibility," Admiral Chen told concerned alien leaders. "We will handle it completely." A few brave species attempted to shelter individual Vorthak refugees who begged for protection. But human forces tracked them down anyway and politely but firmly demanded their surrender. When the aliens refused, humans used non-violent methods to retrieve the Vorthak without harming their protectors. "We harbor no ill will toward species that show compassion," Chen explained to one alien leader. "But the Vorthak cannot be allowed to survive anywhere in the galaxy. This is not negotiable." The final phase of Protocol Omega involved something called historical cleansing. Human teams visited every world, station, and database that contained records of Vorthak civilization. They methodically removed all traces of Vorthak culture, technology, and history from galactic archives. "Future generations must not be able to study Vorthak methods," Admiral Chen wrote. "Their techniques for breaking other species must die with them. Knowledge can be as dangerous as weapons when it falls into the wrong hands." Zara found one final recording that chilled her to the bone. It was a message from the last known Vorthak survivor, broadcasting from a hidden asteroid base. The alien was alone and clearly dying from radiation poisoning. "We were wrong," the Vorthak whispered. "We thought we were the apex predators of the galaxy. We believed no species could challenge our power. But humans are not predators. They are something far worse. They are judgment, and they have found us wanting." The transmission ended abruptly. Records showed that human forces located and destroyed the asteroid base within hours of receiving the signal. After 6 months of systematic extermination, Protocol Omega was declared complete. Every Vorthak in the galaxy was dead. Every trace of their civilization had been eliminated. Even the words Vorthak disappeared from most historical records as human teams quietly edited databases across known space. Zara closed the files and sat in stunned silence. Humanity had committed the most thorough genocide in galactic history. They had erased an entire species so completely that most beings living today had never even heard of them. And they had done it all with calm, methodical precision that suggested they could do it again if necessary. The question that terrified her most was whether the humans still possessed these capabilities. Were the Omega weapons still hidden somewhere in human space, waiting for the next species to cross the line that the Vorthak had crossed? Dr. Zara Keth returned to New Seoul Colony to confront Captain Jin Woo-sung with everything she had discovered. The elderly former diplomat received her in his garden, where he spent most of his time tending to flowers and vegetables. His hands were steady as he poured tea, but she could see the weight of memory in his eyes. "You have learned the full truth," Jin said quietly. "It was not a question. I can see it in your face. You know what we did." Zara nodded. "I know about Protocol Omega. I know about the complete extermination of the Vorthok species. I know that humanity possessed weapons and capabilities that no other species suspected. What I do not understand is why the records were classified. Why hide it from galactic history?" Jin was silent for a long moment, watching butterflies move among his flowers. "Because the galaxy needed to heal. After the Vorthok were gone, we liberated over 4 million broken beings from their slave worlds. 30 different species had survivors who needed to rebuild their civilizations. They needed hope, not fear." He explained how humanity had spent decades after the war helping the Vorthok's former victims recover. Human medical teams developed new treatments for psychological trauma. Human engineers rebuilt destroyed worlds. Human diplomats helped traumatized species re-establish their governments and cultures. But the survivors were terrified of us, Jin continued. They had seen what we could do when pushed beyond our limits. They needed to see us as protectors again, not as the species that could erase entire civilizations from existence. Zara understood now why the historical records had been classified. The truth about Protocol Omega would have made peaceful coexistence impossible. Every species in the galaxy would live in constant fear of humanity, wondering what minor mistake might trigger another extermination campaign. "So you buried the truth to preserve galactic peace," Zara said. "We buried the truth to preserve trust," Jin corrected. "Fear can maintain order, but only trust can build a civilization. The galaxy needed to trust humanity again if we were going to work together to heal the damage the Vorthok had caused." Jin showed Zara through his garden to a small memorial he had built in one corner. It contained stones from 30 different worlds, each representing a species that had suffered under Vorthok rule. Some of those species had been reduced to only a few thousand survivors. Others had lost their entire home worlds and had to rebuild their civilizations from scratch. "Every day I remember what we saved by destroying them," Jin said. "Millions of beings who can live free lives because the Vorthok no longer exist. Children who will never experience the breaking rooms. Artists who can create beauty instead of being turned into empty shells." But Zara still had one crucial question. Do the Omega weapons still exist? Does humanity still have the capability to do this again? The Jin looked at her for a long moment before answering. "What do you think?" The implications of his non-answer were terrifying and comforting at the same time. Humanity had not dismantled their ultimate weapons after the war. They still possessed the ability to completely erase any species that crossed the same line the Vorthok had crossed. "The galaxy is peaceful now," Jin continued. "Species work together to solve problems through diplomacy and cooperation. Trade flows freely between civilizations. Scientific knowledge is shared openly. Art and culture flourish across thousands of worlds. Do you know why?" Zara thought she understood. "Because everyone knows what happened to the Vorthok, even if they do not know the details. Because everyone knows that humanity draws lines," Jin corrected. "Clear, absolute lines that cannot be crossed. Slavery is forbidden. Torture for entertainment is forbidden. The systematic destruction of other species' minds and cultures is forbidden. Cross those lines, and you face extinction." Jin led her back to his apartment and showed her news feeds from across the galaxy. Every day, millions of beings from hundreds of species lived peaceful lives under human protection. Children played in parks on worlds that had once been slave factories. Artists created works of beauty on planets that had been torture centers. Scientists made discoveries that benefited all species, instead of developing new methods of causing suffering. This peace exists because of what we did to the Vorthok, Jin said. Not despite it, but because of it. Every would-be tyrant in the galaxy knows that humanity will tolerate almost anything except the deliberate, systematic torture of innocence. Zara realized that she was holding the most dangerous secret in galactic history. The truth about Protocol Omega could destroy the peaceful civilization that humanity had spent 2 centuries building. But keeping the secret meant becoming complicit in humanity's decision to hide their true capabilities from the species they protected. "What will you do with this knowledge?" Jin asked. Zara thought about all the beings she had met during her research. The elderly aliens who still woke up screaming from nightmares about their time in Vorthak breaking rooms. The young beings who lived free and happy lives because they had been born after the war. The peaceful trade stations and diplomatic conferences, where species that had once feared each other now worked as partners. "I will seal the records again," she said finally. Jin nodded approvingly. Wisdom comes from knowing when ignorance is kinder than knowledge. The galaxy does not need to know exactly how we protect them. They only need to know that we do. As Zara prepared to leave, Jin gave her one final piece of information. "You asked if we still possess the Omega capabilities. The answer is yes. We maintain them because there may come a day when another species decides that causing suffering is more important than preserving peace. If that day comes, we will be ready." Zara returned to the great library of Centauri Prime and sealed all her research files under the highest classification levels. She submitted a report stating that the Vorthak had been a minor species that died out naturally during territorial conflicts 2 centuries earlier. Nothing important. Nothing worth remembering. But she kept one small file for herself. A picture of children from 12 different species, playing together in a park on New Harmony Station. They were laughing and sharing toys, completely unaware that their peaceful childhood was protected by humanity's willingness to commit absolute genocide against any threat to innocent life. Zara understood now that humanity served as the galaxy's guardian angels and guardian demons simultaneously. They protected the innocent with infinite compassion and destroyed evil with infinite efficiency. The perfect protectors for an imperfect universe. As she watched the children play, Zara whispered a prayer that no species would ever again make the mistake the Vorthak had made, because humanity's patience was vast, but not unlimited. And when that patience finally ended, nothing could save you from their judgment. The galaxy remained peaceful, protected by the species that had proven they would do anything necessary to preserve that peace, even if it meant becoming monsters to destroy bigger monsters.